going to look at here is the fraught issue of delivery, of how projects are actually delivered. And now, one of the enduring, and I think in many ways quite dangerous myths about architecture dates back more than 2,000 years to Vitruvius, who thought that architects should be philosophers, technologists, familiar with law, they should be artists, they should be geometricians, they should even be musicians. And of course, architects have absorbed that because it means, again, to quote Hans Hollein, the Austrian architect, alles ist Architektur, everything is architecture. And of course, architects have fed off that myth for generations. But when architecture started to take the form of a modern profession in the 19th century, the division of labor through the construction industry became more and more sophisticated, not necessarily better, but more and more divided. And that has, by various different swings and roundabouts, led to a division between design architecture and delivery architecture. And as our principal next speaker, Dean Kaardal, says, the business of architecture is often a struggle between designers who want to design and managers who want to manage. And the title of his talk is The Business of Architecture and Project Managing Art. Now, Dean is the Vice President and Regional Business Leader of Buildings for Canada West for Stantec, a very large firm of construction professionals. And then when Dean has finished speaking, we're going to have a response from Robin Nicholson. Now, Robin has thought long and hard about the business of delivering architecture, both as a partner in the Cullinan studio, a small but very highly rated design firm based in London, but also in a wider industry role as chair of the professional body of research, trade, and professional organisations in the UK called the Construction Industry Council. So can I hand over to Dean to make your presentation?
Hello, and welcome. Next slide. So thank you. I wonder if when you went to architectural school, you thought that the most important thing that you could do was learn how to make money running your business. It's unlikely that you did that, but some people do. And from our perspective, as we go forward, we see the opportunities to to make money being something very important for our company, but at the same time, designing great buildings for our clients. That those two things can intersect together and can be very helpful as you go forward in your career and in your firms. One of the things that we often see is the sort of the struggle between the design architect, somebody who really doesn't look necessarily at the money. They're there to design a great building for the client, versus the person that put the work plan together and the fees, etc. Often they can be the same people. In our firm, we often have a separation as quite a large firm, but we have to work together and learn how to work together to make sure that we're designing the best solutions for the client, while at the same time trying to make sure that we run our business successfully and stay in business as we go forward. And one of the things we always try to do is really build a strong relationship with the client. Hopefully the client appreciates what we do and that we're able to charge the appropriate amount as we go forward on our projects, so that there is that ability to make a little bit of profit at the end of the day. So it starts with planning ahead. It starts with understanding what the process is of design, and ultimately building that into a work plan and presenting that to the client, and hopefully the client buying into that process. At the same time, it's a very competitive business, so you have to make sure that you're trying to do it efficiently and providing a lot of value to that client, and the client perceives that value so that they select you going forward. And yet you're still able to make money as you work on the projects. So when we look at this, and we look at the process, again, it comes down to communication relationship building with the client. Sometimes we partner with partner firms on mega projects, so relationship building with partners, whether they be consultants, whether they be other architectural partners, whether they be specialists. It's really important that you begin by building those relationships. We try very hard to make friends in the industry across the board, whether it be the end client, whether it be the project management firms at times, the construction firms at times. There's a lot of new delivery methods that are out there. So we try very hard to be collaborative at all times when we're working, and then even internally building the relationships with our internal folks to make sure that they understand that this is a business, but at the same time, we are trying again to provide that ultimate value for the client, whether it be in the functionality of the building, whether it be in how it fits into the community, whether it be in the sustainability and resiliency that the buildings are coming around nowadays. This project is a very interesting one where it's in Calgary. We had to team up almost 3 years in advance of this project coming out. So the first thing we had to know is that there was a project coming out. So again, we had to develop that relationship, in this case with some government agencies. We then this was going to come out as a PFI that you guys might know, or as a P3 in Canada. So again, we had to team up with a contractor. We felt that we needed some partnership on the architectural side. We partnered with a very good firm called Dialogue Architecture, and the two firms, our firm and their firm, sort of met well in advance of this project. Sort of developed and honed a little bit of culture ourselves to make sure that when it came out, we would be well positioned to win, and then ultimately well positioned to deliver. And that pre-planning work, those efforts to meet together and to know one another have really helped in the delivery of this project. It's currently under construction, as you see, and will be finished at the end of next year. It comes down again to understanding as well the owner, having the right leadership on the project is something that we work very hard to do. And in this case, we've got a clinical lead. This is a healthcare project. We have, of course, an overall architectural lead. We have a technical lead. And then we can see the owner on top with their project management team and their clinical leadership. And then below we have all the different sub-consultants. Stantec is a large firm. We have many of those consultants in-house, but we often will have to still again go out and partner with different sub-consultant firms to bring in that specialty expertise that we believe adds value. And then what we do as we go forward is we want to make sure that we have all of the right people on the project, and with the right processes. So again, it's that development of those people. So internally, we do training for our individuals so that they understand, how to deliver some of these projects on time and on budget, and at the same time, how to make sure that we hone our skills with the client so that we can get the client what they want in the right time frame. We do plan ahead again, make sure that we create work plans that the client understands, the schedules that the client understands. In this case, we had to work with the construction schedule as well that the contractor brings to bear. So all those things have to be linked up and make sure that we're delivering in the right way. So this shows a work plan. I've cut off the names to protect the innocent. So sorry about that. We do show, different rates, and then we show, different days, how much time is going to be spent. So we do something where we show week by week, put a schedule together. So again, from the business side, it's very important that we do a ground up work plan, that we understand, all of the time that it's going to take for us to deliver the project from all the different people that work within the firms. Often, again, you'll need to do exercises to make sure that you get the right information to the right people at the right time. So one of the things, again, that we do is have all of our sub-consultants, even when they're providing fees to us, sort of work within our own work plan and make sure that all of that links together in an appropriate budget so that we can deliver the project successfully for the client in the time frame they want, but at the same time still trying to make money. This results in us putting a cash flow package together. From that perspective, it's very important that cash flow match up to in our opinion anyway, very important that the cash flow match up to the progress of the work. Often you can have projects go on hold, perhaps even sometimes get canceled. I mean, obviously, it's very interesting what's occurred, with the unfortunate pandemic that we're seeing. We have seen some projects go on hold. So, if you get too far ahead and you're designing something and it doesn't match your cash flow and you're well ahead of it, and the project goes on hold, often the client won't want to pay you, the amount you've actually maybe spent. So we try to make sure that we match our cash flow and billings to the actual work we're doing, and that's why it's very important that we create that ground up work plan, so that we understand the budgets that we have on a monthly basis and compare it to the cash flow that we're going to be billing the client at, and make sure that those are matched so that we're not out of pocket, let's say, if something unforeseen occurs. When we look at a big projects, sometimes it's very important to have backups, to be resilient if certain things happen, and that you have some plans for certain elements. We've had people retire, we've had people leave us through some projects when you've got a lot of time, and you got to make sure that you've got the ability to recover from that, and that you've built some contingency into your budgeting, so that if something unforeseen occurs, you're able to respond, clean it up, and stay again in course of not losing money ultimately. So it's very important to build a contingency into your project budgets if you can, and ultimately understand that there will be change that occurs, and that you're able to adapt to that change as you go forward. So, sometimes projects as well get cut in half, or even grow, and the ability to grow with the project, or to respond to a reduction can take place, and you're able to handle that and still again stay in business by making a profit. Again, we try very hard to develop efficiencies in our work. We think it provides some value to the client if we can do it perhaps faster, maybe a little bit better as we go forward. We like to start at the end and really learn our lessons from our previous projects, trying very hard to do a lessons learned with the client. Do some stuff with our contractor partners as well at times to say, what could we have done better? How could we have done it perhaps a little faster? Maybe getting some standardized details in certain components of our projects, but at the same time leaving the innovation and allow the architectural group to still design something unique. So in the clinical side, if for instance we have typical rooms or whatnot, that may be something that we're able to bring to bear to do it faster, but at the same time leave the core and shell piece, so that we can have something unique and something special within the communities that we're designing it in. So, and again, from honing our process, learning what technology may help in the future, learning what tools we can use, whether it be some of the new software that's available in parametric modeling, so that you can model things faster and look at several different options as you go along and pick the best value, to obviously 3D modeling and whatnot, so we can have our owners experience the building in a unique way without having necessarily to model it physically any longer as we used to do mock-ups and whatnot. So again, we can see sort of a touch screen in the back and a 3D component there in the front. Having the right tools, honing your processes is very important, we feel, because it does allow you to take that work plan and potentially, put some efficiencies into it. We're in a very competitive world. We're trying to win projects competitively, and you need to learn how to do things a little faster, and maybe also let your clients see things a little earlier, so that they know what they're getting, and ultimately they perceive the value that you're trying to bring to the table. When we look at these three projects, that's sort of a timeline, 2014, 2018, 2020, three different hospital projects that we did, all in sort of a PFI mode in the province that I'm in, British Columbia. It's interesting. We started with a pool planning solutions and some modeling solutions on that first one. That design took about 22 months. All these projects are very similar in size. The next one on the screen we were able to do it in about 18 months, and then the last one we were able to do it in about 16 months. And very similar projects. And again, with honing our skills and honing our full planning process, making sure we knew what was needed by what consultants when. We were able to get the foundations in the ground faster in the last one than we could have in the first one. We were able to work with the user groups, group process, and bring some consistency of design and modularity in some of the construction techniques so that we could build it faster. We're seeing more and more pressure on us as architects and designers to be able to do that. And there's certainly some excellent techniques out there to allow us to do it faster, and I think bring more value to the clients. So again, technology solutions are also available. We do use drones often for some of our remote work, where we can actually take pictures, the groundworks, etc. Maybe even do topographic surveys, etc., so that you're able to do that remotely, especially in some of the remote projects, so you don't have to go there. Once again, that can save some dollars, from a project. We also have Matterport scanners and some of the techniques where you can go and look at an existing building and see what all the services are, et cetera, and model it up and put it into the model without, again, having to draw everything, measure everything yourself, because it does it for you. So again, there are several different technology solutions available today. Many of you are probably very familiar with yourselves and what you use that can provide that efficiency and that opportunity to manage your budgets maybe a little better than in the past. Again, one of the things we want to make sure that you do is you still provide that unique and specialized resource on the projects, whether it be passive house, whether it be cold climate experts, whether it be in the case of healthcare, a special clinician or a lean design expert that can come in and help hone the process and the tools so that you can do it more efficiently, and yet at the same time still provide that very specialized resource that can be the difference between providing a great project and not, whether that even be the great architecture itself that the clients are looking for, and trying to transcend the normal project and give them something quite special. You need those unique and specialized resources. One of the things we try to make sure we're doing is always reaching out to the industry and finding those resources if we don't have them internally, and building those relationships so that when a project comes up, a quick phone call, and we've worked together before, or people have wanted to work with us, or we wanted to work with them, and we can provide that sort of early friendship and early collaboration, so that when we win the project, we're not at odds, and we're aligned and working closely together on the project. This was a cold climate project at Callaway Airport. We had to bring in some cold climate expertise. Did sort of a thermal labyrinth underneath the building to make sure that the permafrost remained perma, so it wouldn't melt, and ultimately the building wouldn't move. And again, we went out and reached out and got some of that expertise for this project, and it's worked very well. So again, it is all about building those strong relationships with the industry, understanding that we are a small community, despite the diverse nature of that community, and trying to make sure that we understand who's out there in that industry, so that we can partner up when needed, and as well build internal relationships with our project managers and our architectural deliverers of the projects, and make sure that they understand that we are a business, but at the same time we are trying to give that value and that special a special unique element to the client by improving their business in whatever buildings we're doing, and that's always our goal. So again, we have a relationship with the contractor. There is a new method called integrated project delivery, called IPD in I guess it's not that new, but in North America. This project was delivered that way, where you've got a single contract with the owner, the contractor, and the consultant team, and even the subcontractors, and it was delivered well. We were able to find significant savings as we went through it by working closely with the contractor, seeing what was expensive and maybe unaffordable, taking some of that out, while at the same time making sure that the criteria that the owner had, in this case a program and a welcoming and friendly building, This is in Saskatchewan, in Moose Jaw, and ultimately we felt that we've delivered a good project. Again, working very closely with the owner. In this project, we had to do a lot of excavation. You can't see that. We were able to use that deep hole to actually put a thermal labyrinth in, really find operational savings for the client in this case. Ultimately, it added a little in capital, but it paid for itself much quicker. So we were able to show them that and demonstrate that from that perspective. And they decided to spend a little extra money. And rather than putting a whole bunch of fill in, they provided a thermal labyrinth, which we were able to preheat the air and ultimately and pre-cool the air and ultimately save a lot of energy. Again, you're trying to get buy-in, from the different stakeholders. The communities out there are now very diverse. We often are working with Indigenous communities, and ultimately you have to meet with those users, really get to understand what their demands and desires are, and try to build those into your projects as you go forward. So diversity is something that should be celebrated, and you try to bring that in with your clients, ultimately bringing success. Again, we try to connect with our communities, really work hard to make sure that we're managing that and bringing the community into our teams to make sure that we are balancing those requirements with the work that we do. In conclusion, what we try to achieve is do great projects by building that relationship with the client, ultimately try to make sure we provide value for them, while at the same time trying to build something that will have a lasting legacy within the community, whether that be because it's beautiful or whether that be because it's functional for the client, and hopefully both as we go forward. So thank you very much.
Am I back on? Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Dean. A very interesting presentation. Robin, do you recognise some of the issues that Dean has described from your experience, both at Cullinan Studio and through the Construction Industry Council?
Jeremy, yes, I do. And hello, everybody. I've got a few thoughts that I put together, which I'm going to explain to you without slides. I agree with Dean's comments on collaboration, testing the brief, appointing the whole team early, learning lessons, etc. It was an impressive presentation of Stantec's multidisciplinary, tech-enabled approach, and of course, the importance of the cash flow that we all need. Jeremy introduced me as a former chair of the UK Construction Industry Council, which indeed I was. I now spend even more time encouraging our professional institutions to collaborate, to work together for their members' benefit, and to have greater influence with government and for the greater good. Each country has its own culture of design and construction. In some, the architect has total control, while in the UK, us architects have a rather reduced power. When designing our new Singapore, the new Singapore Management University, asking our engineers what they thought was seen as a sign of weakness. For me, collaboration with the whole team is the key, and this needs mutual respect. And I think that's where I'm with Dean on this. We are all subject to contracts and insurance, but collaborative contracts with ensured performance outcomes are very rare in the UK. It was good to hear Dean describe one that they're doing. However, we are halfway through the building of a £16 million teaching building at Dudley College using just such a contract. And it'll be interesting to see how it ends up. Why does this matter? Well, climate and biodiversity emergency. In the UK, we have a legal obligation to deliver zero emissions by 2050. With buildings being responsible for at least 40% of the emissions, we have a lot to do. Working backwards, as Dean did, all new buildings will be zero carbon by 2030. And that means that we must all know how to design and build them by 2025, which is about the day after tomorrow. When we were designing a carbon neutral garden city way back in 2010, a carbon neutral garden city for 60,000 people in Shahat in Libya, we had a great multidisciplinary team, and we consulted widely with the local farmers and residents, working closely with government officials. But there were fewer examples for us to draw on then. Now we have pockets of low energy excellence all over the world. In the age of the circular donut economy, we do need to start by questioning whether we really need a new building, especially if it involves pulling down an existing one. Clearly, this is more the case in much of the global north than the global south, which has a lot of building to do. To achieve the net zero buildings by 2030, we need to start setting ourselves performance targets for whole life carbon as part of the brief and commit to regular measurement during design and occupation. The RIBA awards now require you to submit an embodied carbon calculation, so the choice of materials will begin to change. And for instance, the use of cement in concrete will be phased out, as will gas boilers for heating in the UK in 2025. I think it is great that the climate emergency gives us designers even more responsibility and wonderful opportunities. For example, I don't expect to see north elevations to look like south elevations much longer, as orientation is one of the key aspects of reducing demand. Yes, collaboration matters, and I look forward to working with my fellow professionals in all projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robin. And I think some very perceptive comments following Dean's presentation. And I think what's interesting is both of you have highlighted the issue of collaboration, but clearly for the experience that you both have, collaboration is different because at Stantec, Dean's firm is obviously a very large firm where you've got lots of different professionals. And you might occasionally bring in people with real expertise from outside the firm. Whereas Robin, I guess you are always in Cullinan studio working with engineers in separate organizations, maybe different types of engineers, maybe landscape architects. And I wonder if you can both say, perhaps Dean first and then Robin, something about how you can ensure that the collaboration is really creative and effective in this focus on delivering the best outcome for the client.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, what we try to do is make sure that people know one another. In a big firm, that's actually quite a challenge. Where we can get together, understand one another. It's hard to force it. I mean, you try to put the teams together ahead of time, make sure that people understand it, make sure that they have a common goal. For it, we do have working sessions where we'll get together and talk about the goals for the project, make sure that people understand that common goal. Put a bit of a project charter together with the client ultimately, so that everybody sort of gets on that same page and wants to collaborate together. As you said, a diverse set of professionals, a diverse set of ideas that come together from whether it be the engineering teams, whether it be the architectural teams. So what we try to do is, again, pre-do that, get the team look like together so that they understand how they can work together. And again, some of the processes that we develop as well from a planning process, when people understand the schedule and the time so that they can come in and deliver their stuff on time, which obviously helps the project and helps value for the client. Thanks.
It depends a large extent on the client because we have to work really closely with the client so that they understand the importance of appointing the whole team right at the beginning if we're to deliver a contemporary, low energy, hopefully near zero building, which means, for instance, that you need the landscape architect on day one because they are an important part of the climate strategy. You need the environmental engineer on day one because we don't know it all. And immediately you open up the team to a wider group, then you get a better discussion going, assuming, of course, that everyone is working together. I think the big challenge is when and how to bring in the contractor, and how contracting is going to change over time, because to a certain extent, as professionals, we probably could be doing a lot of the construction management ourselves as a team, but that's, I think, a rarity.
Yeah, and Robin, on that note, I mean, do you recognise Dean's comment that there is this division between architects who want to design and managers who want to manage? And how do you deal with that in a relatively small firm like Cullinan Studio?
Well, I think we manage that by recognising that we all have our strengths and weaknesses, and we even within a practice our size, people who are much better at the minutiae and the management than others who are better at the or more comfortable with the imagining alternative futures. I think the key that we have is that we work in a open studio. We all work together. It is a collaborative, it's a cooperative, and has been for 60 years. So we are in it together, and we recognize one another's talents and try to make the best use of them.
Yeah, I want to go a bit further into the issue that Dean raised about cash flow. Now, you know, plans of work and other sorts of ways of constructing and charging fees don't always recognise the level of work that needs to be done at each stage. Nor necessarily do they recognise the different levels of expertise, maybe from internal or external consultants, that needs to be brought together. And I wonder, Dean, if you can say something about how you manage that cash flow to be allocated to different professional skills, whether it's within your firm or whether it's outside the firm. Because I guess ultimately for the client wants the best possible project, wants to know more or less what it's going to cost, and doesn't really mind how that's divided up, provided the outcome is right.
Yeah, ultimately, again, it does come down to the conversations that you can have with the client so that the client understands it. I think it's a very interesting question, because what we're seeing now with, you know, the emphasis on sustainability and resiliency, that early stage planning, which, you know, perhaps we used to think was maybe 10% or 12.5% of the fee, you know, sometimes can be up to 20% of the fee or more. And maybe even that early design development can be 40% of the fee. And therefore, you want to make sure that your cash flow and that the client understands that early work, which might be much heavier today in some of the projects that you're doing, because if you get it right, you can often bring, you know, some modularity or some components in the design, the detailed design part, that you know, can be much more efficient. But that early planning stage, you know, has to be allowed for. So we that's why we do cash flow. That's why we show our clients the cash flow, so they understand what they're going to be paying. And if they don't like it, well, obviously they can have that conversation with you. But that new, you know, the new reality is you're often are spending more money up front, and it's very important that all of us capture that and let the clients know that's the new world order as it might be.
And I guess this approach to managing the cash flow and bringing the clients in to how you're using their money, how you're spending their money, is a very useful tool if you need to negotiate for extra fees, if the plan of work changes and the scale of work changes, as you said, often happens during the lifetime of a project.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's a helpful tool to sort of say, here's where we should have delivered. You've got your scheduled deliverables. Ultimately, when the client changes their mind or adds something, or even deletes something, which, you know, causes you to do some rework, you want to be able to say, hey, that wasn't built in, and ultimately, you know, please pay us for it. I mean, we are in business. You know, often we want to say yes. You know, we like the fact that we have the assignment. The client wants you to say yes, and it takes that discipline to be able to come in and say, look, we believe that we deserve this extra. We're, you know, design professionals. We've done extra work, all lawyers of the world would certainly ask for more if they were doing it. I think that's something, the discipline that we have to bring to this, the business discipline, to say, yes, we should get paid for the extra work we're doing.
And Robin, I guess
I agree with that. I mean, I think that sometimes our plea for fees for more work fall on deaf ears. But I think the Dudley College project is really interesting because with the client and, in fact, with the main contractor, we all sat around a table and worked out, before we drew anything, how much time we were going to spend and what we would be paid for doing that work. And we've been paid, once that was agreed as a schedule, we are then paid against that schedule. And if we're asked to do extra work, we get paid for doing it at an agreed rate. Now, we've never had such an arrangement before, but it is really, really good discipline to work out beforehand exactly what you're going to spend your time doing, and for the client to be party to that.
Yes, and do you think that this sort of can be adopted as best practice? And if so, thinking back to your Construction Industry Council hat, how can you get that message across to clients that there are huge advantages for them in understanding how their cash is spent in this way?
It sounds wonderfully logical, and you would think it happens. I mean, it's supported by the government, it's supported by the Cabinet Office, it's supported by a whole range of official bodies. But unfortunately, many of our clients are surrounded by people who like managing other people, and lawyers and insurers. And I think the insurance industry is probably the biggest problem we all face, which is they don't like insuring anything new. So they don't like insuring things they don't know about. And particularly in the UK, insuring other people's work is really, really difficult at the moment, and not helped by the economic situation, of course. But I think the insurers ought to be part of the solution.
And I think we covered that to some extent in our business stream session yesterday. But Dean, from your point of view, in a very large firm, do you see that you've got some weight? When you make these recommendations, that what you say carries some influence and authority, perhaps?
Probably, unfortunately, probably not more so than the small firms. But what I will say is, the one advantage that we have, I'm in the buildings group, but we do have a big civil group. We have a big transportation group. And what we see in those big mega projects is the fact that cash flow, has been put forward. It sort of taught us in our building side that we should be bringing that forward and showing it to the client and getting the client's buy-in. Because once the client has that buy-in that we've talked about as well earlier, they then have sort of accepted the fact that this is going to happen. So when there's significant change, which we've seen in civil projects, it seems much more readily acceptable that in those big mega projects, that if there's change, that you get paid for the change, versus buildings, which has always struggled to some degree to get that extra when there's a change. But when you put that cash flow forecast, when you put that work plan in front of them, and you put your deliverable schedule in front of them, when that changes, they have no choice but to at least listen to you, because you've developed that plan and put that forward and say, hey, look, this is obviously significantly different now. There's certainly reasons why, and ultimately, please, can you pay us for that? We do find that we're much more successful because we've shown them the plan than when we just had, maybe old percentage fees, et cetera, that we used to do.
Yeah, I think what we're coming to here is almost a way of putting back together the sort of Vitruvian hodgepodge of different skills that architects are meant to have. It's obviously impossible for a single individual to have all the skills that Vitruvius says an architect ultimately should have. But through having some form of collaborative group, which can ebb and flow, where the different disciplines can ebb and flow in terms of leadership and support, that we might actually get back to the point where the design team is offering those skills as a philosopher, technologist, lawyer, artist, geometrician, and musician. And I think, as Robin was saying, insurer as well, because I think insurance is, as we've said, absolutely key to this, and how that is provided.
I quite bring it on, I say, Jeremy. I mean, I think the one thing that we haven't talked about is about the need to consult with the users, and I think that's a way in which we, as architects, particularly, can win the respect of our clients by demonstrating that through consultation we can actually save them a lot of money by adjusting the brief so that it's a shared brief rather than a collection of individual briefs. And then we can work with them with them.
We're losing connection.
Yeah, I'm hearing that. That's just
Okay.
Have we fit? I think we're all still here.
Good. Okay. No, we lost the connection in the studio there, but I think that's a very interesting note to come to a conclusion on. If I take the thrust of what you were saying, which is about the user being part of this collaborative approach, and the user, of course, is now a much more complicated issue in the sense that the client might be a public sector client providing a facility which will be used by a very wide range of the public. I mean, as Dean was showing, some of those big hospitals, the client might be your PFI consortium or the local authority, the regional health authorities, but it can also be seen as being the individual users, the patients in the case of a hospital. So thank you very much to both Robin and Dean for a fascinating conversation before we're handing back for the next session. Thank you.
Thank you very much.